start. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for coming to Chad Heltzel's book launch. So I just I want to thank Laura Passin for being our special guest today. I'm Chad's publisher. My name is Snezana Zabic, and I'm one of the founders of Match Factory Editions. I just wanted to welcome all the fans of poetry and small presses and public libraries, Chad students, all our friends, and maybe are there Jeopardy fans also in the audience? Right? I hosted the event, and just kind of this is like a running joke almost. We have these high hopes for a crossover between Jeopardy fans and poetry fans, and Chad being the crossover. Just to say a little bit about Match Factory Editions, we're a press that was founded, officially was launched earlier this year, so we're, 6 months old, maybe 7 months by now. But the press has been in the works since the lockdown, which we're finding out is one of the results of the lockdown. Laura's Press was founded, or originated during the lockdown, and some other new friends through small presses. That it just so happened. It's kind of fascinating. Maybe someone will explain what happened, and some historians in the future will look into that. But I wanted to start a press in part because I had friends who had brilliant manuscripts. I had been publishing with small presses in the States and in Europe, mostly kind of lucking into those contracts. And meanwhile, my friends who I thought had manuscripts that were excellent, they were better than mine, they weren't. And I said, we got to put a stop to that. And if I have to start a press, I will. And also just having had experience with a couple of different small presses, I learned a lot, and I wanted to take what I learned and then also do things a little bit differently. My friend Robin R.D. Morgan, who lives in LA, she helped me with it. So now we're a press based in Chicago and in LA. And I always say we are a press by the downwardly mobile for the downwardly mobile. and that's our so today we're gonna read from our books, and then we'll have a Q&A, and we'll be happy to answer your questions about our poetry, about poetry we love, about publishing. So I assume there are always, when there's a poetry event, there are poets in the audience, and I love these conversations that happen that way. So. I was thinking about some things that connect the three of us, and one happens to be Chicago. We all lived in Chicago, and I still live there for a period of time. That's where I met Chad, although you guys met here in Denver. We all have deep interest in language and its possibilities and its failures, and we like to play with that. We cover outer space. We'll cover that probably today. Illness and grief, immigration, music, big cities, small towns, food, there's a lot of food, history and herstory. So I'm going to start by reading some selections from Concrete is More Beautiful, Disfigured and Stained. Starting a small press is scary and hard, and Robin and I published our own books first to learn and make mistakes with our books before tackling other people's books. So we edited each other's manuscripts, and this wouldn't have been the book that I'm proud of had not been for the help of people who had read parts of it along the way, and people who edited the final version. And this is a book in which that phrase "concrete is more beautiful, disfigured and stained" is repeated throughout the book in certain poems, and I kind of meant it for those who live in areas where concrete has been crumbling for a while, and are surviving and figuring out ways to get by, and to maybe beat the system eventually, or at least fight the system along the way. And I started the book with with a prose poem that's kind of a message to the reader, I guess. It's called Goodbye 20th Century. Chicago is a poem with lines that break when there's no more land. I read it on foot, on my bike, on the CTA, and while I hang around, staring at buildings and the urban wildlife, decoding human faces and cataloging it all. Reinforced concrete crumbles, and engineers, taggers, street artists, and I try our best to preserve it. I live in this settler colony, in a settlement that became a metropolis in the previous century, in a building the same age as me. Memories of Yugoslavia and Europe have faded in my mind. They've moved into my molecules like a chronic viral infection. I perform lab tests of myself over and over with language as my only instrument. This one is called Orbison, and when I wrote the poem, I was like, oh, this is a Chad Heltzel inspired poem. And it mentions a song by Roy Orbison called In Dreams. You can look it up later and maybe the poem will. Well, then read the poem again. But this is how it goes. Orbison. Researchers have baked a loaf of bread with ancient Egyptian sourdough they extracted from a terracotta bowl fragment. They ate that loaf. People have always believed in the eternal return, etched that belief into pottery, slid choruses into songs, inserted steel rods into cinder blocks. They knew. Concrete is more beautiful disfigured and stained. Roy Orbison once released a song without a chorus, a different chord progression for each verse. He sang with his whole vocal range. The phrase in dreams returned again and again. Radio DJs played the song. It was February '63. Those radio waves carried Roy into deep space at the speed of light. It's 2020. Roy has reached the system of Mu Are and its planets, visible from the southern hemisphere. Researchers have detected a rocky planet there that makes a full circle around its sun in 10 Earth days, right on an empty stomach before sleep. Or don't. Everything is all right. I decided that today whoever buys a Heltzel or a Passin also gets to go home with a Zabic. So it's buy one, get one free. I brought a copy of my memoir, a copy of my other book of poetry and my current collection. But we're gonna next hear from Laura Passin. She's a Denver poet. I can't wait to read the second book called We the Destroyers, available today. It's dropping in October, so you're getting a preview. And I'll just read from the blurb for the book from Laura's press, Riot in Your Throat. And it says, We the Destroyers is a collection of poetry about the end of days, about the pandemic, about grief and chaos and loss, but also about survival, redemption, and hope. Let's give a round of applause for Laura Passin.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to make you happy, obviously. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Snezana, for that amazing thing. Those poems were wonderful, and I feel like it's a great segue into me, destroying the world with you all. Again, I'm Laura Passin. I live here in Denver, and I'm also a high school teacher. And this book, which is about to be released on October 1st, is my post-2020 book, pandemic, but also climate change, and also thinking about the upheaval that we're all still living through. So I am going to read you some poems from it and give you a little bit. I actually, some of the things I feel like I have to explain, you actually also already explained, like the word Anthropocene, which appears in my very first poem.
And I guess we put the emphasis on a different syllable.
I guess we do,
Yeah.
different regional accents, I suppose.
I'm sure you're the correct.
Oh, I don't know. The geologists are still debating, they haven't officially adopted it. I have a very good friend who's a geologist, and so I'm keep on these things. But there's a faction of people in the geology academic world who say, no, this is definitively a new era, and there's some that say this is being too human-centric. So I think that's kind of interesting. But the first poem I'll read for you is called Grief Counseling in the Late Anthropocene. And it is about, among other things, the Great Lakes and the dinosaurs. Grief Counseling in the Late Anthropocene. When the world ends, it will not matter who exactly left it early. The years shaved off the living heart, the brain cells torqued and plaqued by damaged genes. It will not matter that once the Cuyahoga lit up like a factory dying, that the water bequeathed to the Great Lakes by tired glaciers corroded ships and fish alike. What we leave behind is massive, minute, a layer of unusual soil that circles a moment, a disease ring in the globe spark. That's how we figured out what ate the dinosaurs, a strange signature everywhere. No one will miss us. We are the comet ourselves. This next poem, so this book is called We the Destroyers, and in this book I thought a lot about that. We the collective sort of humans and what we're doing to everything. So these poems are kind of, I'm going to read these we poems to start with. This is a poem that I wrote in the winter of 2020 to 2021 when we were all waiting for vaccines. So this is called Christmas Season. We waited and waited for the snow to come. It did not come. We offered our arms, an army of serums, against an illness so clever we all turned stupid. We dug tornado shelters in the darkest solstice, the farmer's almanac upside down and half on fire, as seasons shook out and rearranged their pages. We made cars that drove themselves and steered us straight on the train tracks. We built vacuum-enabled sleeping bags to yank the pressure from the heads of astronauts as they dream, to keep their eyes from bursting. We took stacks of pills and pissed them back in the drinking water, saved it for our gardens. We saved little storm-orphaned dogs and cats, brought them in our homes, and dressed them like children to make up for the way we slaughtered the honeybees. We kissed under mistletoe and dressed the table with poison berries. We praised some god for daring to be born. The next couple poems I'm going to read to you are a little more personal to me. My first book, Borrowing Your Body, which thank you so much for your kind words, was partly about the death of my mother when I was 30 years old. And I'm not 30 anymore. It actually has been a long while. And so, and I teach at a high school for girls here in the Denver area, so I work with teenage girls all the time. And I had this realization a couple of years ago that my mother had gone as long as my students had been born. So this poem is about that, and it's a short one. It's called Mother/Daughter. Your ghost is now 13, an impish girl, rolling her eyes at me, humiliated by my existence, my insistence that she stay in sight, that she's only a child, it's dangerous out there, that she never leave me. This one is also about my teenage students, sort of. So Okay, so I'm hoping that you know about the Supreme Court decision over Griffel v. Hodges, which is what made marriage equality legal and the law of the land across the nation and not just state by state. And during the pandemic, I had a strange experience where a coworker asked me if I'm legally married. So this poem is in response to that. Okay. And it's called, the title is also the first line of the poem. So the title is 6 years after Obergefell, my coworker asks me if my marriage is legal in the state of Colorado. So, 6 years after Obergefell, my coworker asks me if my marriage is legal in the state of Colorado. And I hide my shock gracelessly, grateful for once for the mask, keeping our breaths in our own faces. How much each of us is permitted to not know, what we are lucky to never learn. My students, bless them, think queerbaiting is something a TV show does, and not something a group of men does when they want to hurt what they fear. They go to school mass and hear that God loves them. No one points to a verse and spits. No rocks are thrown. They trust that the world owes them middle age because after all, here I am, boring in my dailiness. We occupy a different country. These teenagers in their reckless beauty, thinking justice is so obvious, so clearly correct, that it is already historical. And this woman, individually, achingly kind, walking through a world where I am so new as to be unthinkable, futuristic. I tell her about the law of the land, and she congratulates me. For the Supreme Court, I think, though that court is dead, and this one has its fist in my gut. And I am too tired to say I am glad that this time around, the court came first, and the plague came after. That when we looked at each other in fear and said, one of us could die from this, there was a solution to the problem of hospital visits, of the house, of the breathing machines. What luck I have, allowed to remember the terror that I was not forced to live. Such as it is. You may be aware that that decision is one of the ones that is in danger of being overturned. So, call whoever it is you call when learning about these things. Okay. Got one more teaching poem, maybe. This poem is this is one of my favorite poems in the book because this poem captures something that I've been trying to get into a poem for like 10 to 15 years, which is how many tampons NASA thought Sally Ride would need. So, but this poem is also about teaching the Odyssey, which is something I do every year with my freshmen. So this is called Poem in Which I Fail to Teach Homer. So, poem in which I fail to teach Homer. When Sally Ride suited up for America, the NASA engineers asked her if 100 tampons was the correct number for one 32-year-old woman to spend 1 week in space. That is not the correct number, she said. That is not the correct number, she said. I tell this to my students because they are teenage girls and they already know the world thinks they are a mystery. We know more about the surface of Jupiter. The engineers counted everything, limited even the souvenirs each astronaut could take because pound for pound, fuel was so precious. How many gallons of menstrual blood did they calculate for? What horror as they imagined a female body escaping the earth. In class, we are talking about Penelope, how she fooled the suitors for 3 years because they knew nothing of weaving, of women's work. Didn't they get suspicious? One girl asks. Once, I told my dad I had PMS for 6 weeks straight, and he believed me, replies another. I don't know anything. They hate Odysseus, these girls. They have him pegged as a villain. When I was in school, they wheeled an ancient television into our classroom one day, spent eternities hooking every plug to every socket. And then we watched 7 people die live on TV. Sally Ride was scheduled for the next mission. She never flew again. My students don't know about the Challenger explosion. They are living through different disasters. They are angrier than I knew how to be at 15. Why does it matter if Penelope is faithful when Odysseus sleeps with every woman he meets? They ask. I tell them it doesn't matter to us, but it matters to Ithaca. Ithaca isn't fair. When Odysseus, salt-crusted and naked, flirts with Nausicaa, so young that she still plays catch. My girls talk about the grown men who follow them, the men who call after them, the men who scare them. I'm sorry this happens to you. I say it happened to me too. Earth isn't fair. Sally Ride knew the Challenger inside and out. She lived in that ship, further at sea than Odysseus could dream of. In the press conference before launch, they asked, "Do you ever cry on the job?" When Penelope weeps, Homer says, her mind moves elsewhere. No one knows what she knows. I am going to now read a couple poems from, there's a sonnet sequence in the middle of this book for folks who are fans of sonnet sequences, which I am, so it doesn't really matter if anybody gets it. But I found myself during that lockdown year really thinking about holidays. So I tried to write the sonnet sequence based on some holidays. I'm going to read you 2 poems from that. And the sequence is that word Anthropocene again, that year in the late Anthropocene. And so I'm going to read you the poem Easter and then Thanksgiving. So this poem Easter is a fantasia on about a true thing, which is that on Mount Everest, climate change is causing the permanent snow to melt. And so if you know anything about the history of Mount Everest expeditions, people, if you die on Mount Everest, you can't bring your body back down. They just leave you there. And so a thing that seems to be really happening because of climate change is that the snow is melting and all these old corpses are uncovered, which I find very creepy. So this poem's about that. Easter. The dead are unburying themselves on Everest. As the snow melts, they sit up, stretch, unbreak femurs, de-ice cells of sleeted blood. They survey the shit piles, rusted oxygen tanks, snowbound trash, discarded by the lucky and the warm. They see the mountain excavate the past, but these glory-drained corpses are not reformed. They climb because it's there. They've been here while the living walked by, reached for the hand of God, found only the icicle stare of another ghost. There's no unruined land, no surface able to withstand our love. Everything we hide, the dead will crawl above. This one is from the same sequence. This is called Thanksgiving. And again, this is that sort of lockdown here. And I was thinking about that Thanksgiving versus childhood Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving. We get the food by mail. We don't set foot outside the house this year. You'll catch your death, my mom would tell us kids, her rust belt soot around the bells. Which deaths do we accept as given, as fact? Which ones are plague-stench murders of neglect? Hurry, hold your breath, we'd say when we pass the graveyard, unless you want to catch a ghost. My burning chest would give me up, force the spirit through me. And now, I can't call back timbre or tone, just the mutter of her voice as she would find the gizzards, unlock flesh from bone. Thankful is not the word for what we are, grieving predators, curled around a star. And then I think I'm going to do two more poems. Snezana mentioned outer space being a theme here, and there's a whole section of my book that is actually set in a post-Earth world where people have had to leave and get on generation ships and settle elsewhere. I don't see what else happens to these folks. So this one is called Dominion, and it's set on the ship. Dominion. When the waters turned brown, we shot our gaze skyward. The birds took no pity. We'd come down from the trees, after all, to ruin what we touched. There was only one direction left to devour. We built ourselves wings, called the first ship Dominion, gloated as we rose above feathered things. In the onboard lab, the caged parrot learned to speak as the captain. Preening her cloak, she spat orders that no one followed, cursed the boy who shrank as he fed her. 50 years old, the last of her kind captured and not bred, she plumed her voice to breaking, answered only to the master. Now, one more, which is the title poem of the book. And this actually, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Alicia here, because I believe you inspired this one, because you gave prompts to write about what you're write about the opposite of what you usually write about. So that's where this came from. So you'll see by the first one. So we the destroyers. And what if the world isn't ending? I know about the others who were certain they lived in the twilight. They made ceremonies, shaved their bodies, killed themselves before they could be crushed by time. Holy fools who mistook their feelings for history. They knew what the earth deserves from us, our absence. What if it just goes on this way? Ugly, terrifying, so that I forget the texture of crumbling flyleaf in a rotting book from my library, so that no one is old enough to remember what it felt to solve a problem, to really fix it. No more smallpox, not anywhere. We did that. We, the destroyers, did that. In the version where I am wrong, we keep going. We ruin everything and salt the wounds, and still something green and bloody comes back. We are not the hard, unforgiving seeds, but the fire that cleaves them open. Thank you so much for listening to my
outer space and parallel histories, and yeah, I love that. I was thinking, what would be the opposite of what I write? Right. It would be like, yours is the world is not ending. For me, it would be like, the world is a great place.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good exercise.
Yeah, I think I'll try it. All right, so Chad Heltzel's debut collection, Recordings of Dead Languages, is dropping this Tuesday, officially, that's its official pub date. There's a funny story about how I ended up here in Denver this weekend, but maybe during the Q&A. But I just wanted to sing praises to Recordings of Dead Languages. I saw earlier versions of this book. This book has been in the works, basically for 20 years, and it shows. When we got that manuscript, it was perfect. It didn't need any editing, any changes. It was, we were both just in awe. So just to say a couple of things about it, at least in our reading, and you can talk about your intent, it might be different, but for us it was a book that captures the essence of disappearing, and we see each poem in the book as a cabinet of curiosities. But along with small exotic objects, Chad's poetic imagination contains whole species, the extinct ones and the newly discovered ones, drowned worlds and its fossils. And then we also had to add this: as long as our own world is in jeopardy, it is necessary to have Chad's poetry as a companion. But we mean it too. So let's give a round of applause to our favorite poet.
Thanks, Neja, and I appreciate you saying like the manuscript was like ready upon arrival. Even though I've like changed it like a million times since then. So thanks. And thank you also to Laura for being here. I really appreciate you sharing your new work with us. I'm going to start with the first poem in the collection. It's called Natural History. This is in reference to a mural in the Roosevelt Red Line station in Chicago. And pretty much all of these poems were written in Chicago, with maybe one exception. Natural History. Precambrian to Cenozoic, volcanoes emerging from prehistoric seas, green algae spewing from vents on the ocean floor, the lineage of arthropods, brachiopods, ancient fish, ferns, and pines. The Ice Age and evolution of giant bears, lions, elephants. As the earth broke apart, animals traveled bridges of quaking land, were stranded on archipelagos caused from the breakage. At the mural's end, the escalator rises to the ceiling like a stalagmite, and all the passengers make their way from underground cars to the rail line above the street. We are still crossing. Okay, so a couple of things, and I really also appreciate, like you say, that the Orbison poem was a Heltzel poem. I could be so happy. But I became really interested in taking very strange, different things and saying, hey, what do these have to do with each other? And then trying to make a poem out of it. So I think this is a good example. It was partly inspired by an article I found where a new species was discovered in central Vietnam that was a cattle. And I just thought that was fascinating because usually it's things like insects or, like things at the bottom of the sea. Something that large was amazing to me. And then it's also after a photograph by Jeff Wall called Flooded Grave, which I think is in the Chicago Museum of Art. Recognition. 11 new species discovered in a central Vietnam mountain rainforest. 3 species of rare leafless orchids. 1 produces a black flower. Also a butterfly, yellow striped with red spots along the body. A skipper quickly darting when it flies. Only a decade ago, a new species of wild cattle was found roaming here among the trees. Nothing so small as insect or flower. In the country's heart, somehow lost to sight. And all this time, the river has provided its water for thousands living downstream. It is called the Perfume River, no less. Its scent gathered from tropical flora, growing along its banks after traveling through 55 waterfalls. Follow it. Mock lemon, cinnamon bark, lotus flower that creates tea from its water. Gardenia, camellia, cilantro, the river pocking with rain, dripping off the epiphytes. Here is where you find it. In the blurred distance, a crow waits indifferently between a shimmer, either tombstone or flood pool. Ribbons of water hoses, red and blue, lead to the grave site. The water has gathered inside, blankets the floor of the hole. At a glimpse, it is all there, but only for a second. Everything is here. Urchins and starfish, rupture of light, water drops, vanilla bean, mother and father, black orchid. So this one, in part, is from a story that a friend of my mother had told about some things that happened at her house. But also, if you travel Interstate 65 going south from Chicago to Indianapolis, there's a place where there's a billboard, and it has one side that says Jesus is real and another side that says hell is real. And so here's my apocalyptic, or one of them. Pastoral. On the roadside billboard, Jesus is real. Little maples are growing in the collapsing farmhouse gutters. In the front yard, a tulip tree struck by lightning, one half white. Termites burrowed under the house and into the living room, consumed a shelf of encyclopedias. No more MOAs, no money, no mythologies. The television, 1 in 4 mammals will soon be extinct. This year, the fields are surprisingly green. Everything, the beans, the corn, the maples, the pigweed, all deep emerald green. The other side, hell is real, and the fields, all one green. Eloise May off the coast of Mauritius harbors endangered species of ebony. A pink pigeon lives here. It was once home to its own species of tortoise, now extinct. In its place, the Aldabra giant tortoise has been introduced to fill its niche. A dodo statue stands in the forest as a memorial to the island's history of extinction. Upon its discovery, the dodo was classified as a type of swan or vulture or albatross. The island Île aux Aigrettes means island of egrets. There are no native egrets here. Only the cattle egret is found here, an accidental species blown by typhoons lost on its course. The dodo was in fact a giant pigeon, and its closest living relative is the Nicobar pigeon, named for its jade-green gizzard stone used to make jewelry. Elsewhere in Mauritius, fossils of dodos and other recently extinct animals were unearthed from the marshland of Marhosonge, where treasure seekers continue to hunt for pirates' buried riches. The dodo bones found in the marsh are now on display at Oxford University. Other museums possess a head, a foot, a fragment. We have yet to process the effect of its loss. Consider the Tamilakok. Its age is impossible to determine as it bears no growth rings. The tree goes by many names: Calvaria, dodo tree, Sideroxylon grandiflorum, once Calvaria major. Note, names change over time. As more species become known, we must find more names. If the species fits better elsewhere, it should be renamed. In the 1970s, scientists disbelieved only 13 specimens of Tamilakok had survived the centuries. A study concluded the tree's hard seeds must have been broken by the gizzards of dodos. Since the dodo had been extinct for over 200 years, the trees could not germinate without passage through the birds. In fact, new trees have grown. Saplings are difficult to identify, are often confused with other species. Botanists can germinate seeds by force feeding them to turkeys or tumbling them in gem polishers, turning them into jewels. Today, dodo is a brand of jewelry. Ads feature a panning shot of ocean blue waters above coral reefs. Nouveau riche youth surf and drink wine in a sailboat. Charms are available in the shapes of seahorses, octopuses, starfish. Bestsellers include Summer Woman, More Love, Follow Your Dreams. While we're on dead animals, this poem, I was reading 2 simultaneous stories about whales washing up on the coast, but one was on the east coast and one was on the west. And I think this all must have happened right around the time of the Indian Ocean tsunami, so that all kind of came together here. Current. In the field through which the observer walks, the black boot of one standing as if to measure the opening of the other's mouth, having come up for air to breathe forever and die that way. These giants wash ashore and waste to bone on the beach, a smooth path worn into sand by their fins as the surf's rinse relieves the pain of their organs crushing under their body's weight. Perhaps all of this
is a question of the magnetic field. There must be an invisible eddy projected from the Earth's core through which all things drift, and from that current comes a sudden flow of tremors pulling the compass apart, conducting the field of whales toward coastline gently enough to move them with salt's buoyancy, and yet with such force to compel their immensity out of the ocean. The act of flowing become flux, as a change in the nature of breath, for example, such that oxygen inside the body becomes new through an act of intimacy. A molecule of air propelled from pockets in the lungs, the stream charging from neuronal pathways, rushing along synapses like electricity passing through coils in waves of sparking light, like waves of water produced by the submarine drifting plates. The Earth's interior heating, then funneling upward through mountains created by colliding masses, so hot even iron able to change properties in the path of the field loses its power. So high the waves reach 50 feet and plow into the seaside, a wall of water inundating, runners in the tides crush, drowning them at sea among the timber of their homes. And so many miles away, the whales drift up on the opposite shore of a continent, lying on their sides, trying to right themselves at my feet. Stumbling around. All right, leavening. Something driven between, a beak, a spring of teal and a troubling of goldfish. Hair is feather, its scales. Your knuckles pressing the dough flat. Sound of bells tolling, exultation of larks. Yeast in the water, waves rise. A siege of cranes, a mutation of thrushes. Bread made with honey, drops of it in the center. Straw floating in the rain, perhaps a hollow bone. Yellow bread, a grist of bees. A strand of your hair in my fingers, nothing left but the dust. A drop of honey, a knife, an empty plate on the counter. A wedge of flying swans, descent of woodpeckers. Rain scours pollen from the ground, river of salt. As Snezana mentioned, these poems are 20 years old on average, and this one shows the age the most, where I'm talking about, soon I will be 30. Artifacts. All right, this was called Learning Polish. You are thinking too much, trying to think about it in English at the same time, the instructor says. 30. I believe I may never be able to speak it either, a necessary word, but this is the only way for me, assembling the sounds together as in English, speaking quickly, only the consonants surrounding the space between words, not żwago. Repeat and try again. 30, 30, as in soon I will be. I cannot leave English behind now. Przepraszam. Instead, English and Polish at once. Stop żwago. Listen to how the consonants collapse together over the space, everything else erased. I have said it. Przepraszam. Repeat. I'm sorry. Szczęście. Happiness. Hush, Chad. The sound of calm said twice, then a cry of pain before concluding again your silence. I repeat. Szczęście. Repeat it. Happiness. I was struck by how many languages where the word for cry and rain is very similar. And so that's where this came from, where words from various languages for cry and rain started. Lexicon. Jorar, 1, yurt, houses made of skin. 2, yearning, even under the umbrella you cry. Deszcz, 1, dust, cobwebs, scraps of paper, all of it swept into the corners.
2. Etch, acid rain. Hyson, 1. Rice bird. The male's yellow crest like a sunflower in the field. 2. Risen, the oven filled with bread. Déchiré, 1. Dishcloth, water dripping down your hands when wrung. 2. Decay, the leaves in the gutter thick and heavy with rain. Pleurer, 1. Pleura, breath rises over the lungs. 2. Plural, making the nouns agree, so many of them. Pleuvoir, 1. Plovers, falling. 2. Ouvre, the house we have built, what rests inside it. Chichech, 1. Crashes, termites in the joists, dust raining from their holes in the wood. 2. Chardash, the dance begins slowly but finishes as a typhoon. Jetch, 1. Drench, covered in rain. 2. Judge, what we have finished will define us. Schreien, 1. Shriven, confession, we tell each other everything. 2. Shrine, in silence, watching the candles die. Jover, 1. Love, the oven bird builds its nest over us. 2. You've, please, this you can keep.
This is the title poem, Recordings of Dead Languages. Alexander von Humboldt followed a Venezuelan river to find the Orinoco's source. Along a certain rainforest trail, he encountered a group of Carib Indians who had recently killed a tribe of neighboring Maypures. Among their plunders, the Caribs had taken some parrots. During the encounter, the birds spoke some Maypure words, which von Humboldt recorded in his journal. The parrots spoke the names of lilies, a crane's bill, a type of piranha. Von Humboldt saw trees he could not identify. Moriche palm. It is called the tree of life, they said. What is this? Von Humboldt asked. Condor. This is the name. Caracas, Huatzin, Macaw, Iguana, Chapurro, Toucan. This is what they are called. They croaked these words, and a scribe wrote them as best he could. The birds flew into the canopies and called behind them. Oilbird, manganese, flamingo, capybara. The parrots traveled and traveled, freeing words as they blended into the greenery. Okay, so this is a new poems, by the way. This one is a reworking of a poem I wrote many years ago for my master's thesis. The speaker in the poem, her name is Anna Kupanesh. She was also known as Aunt Sage, also known as the Lady in Red. She is known as the woman who gave up John Dillinger to the FBI, and he was killed in Chicago outside a movie theater, and the biograph there. Anna Sage was a madam at a brothel and a successful businesswoman who had come from Romania. And when she was approached to turn over Dillinger because he had been frequenting the brothel there, she had made a deal with the U.S. government that she would do this as long as she didn't have to go back to Romania. And true to America's word, we deported her afterwards. So the poem is told from her point of view a few days before her death, which I also found out is a few days before the Romanian Royal or National Opera House opened. So this is kind of imagining her sneaking into a rehearsal. Ovation. After catching fire and burning to the ground twice, the Opera House will reopen. The first performance will be Aida. I lived through war here in Timișoara, Romania bombed and bombed by the Allies and stolen by the Soviets. I should be sick of war stories. Romania's story is my story, choosing the doomed side. These velveteen seats are drenched in red, the color of war and blood and prostitutes, and embers of a cigar glowing then fading outside a movie theater. The frescoed dome surrounds the chandelier with warriors or angels. Aida chooses to bury herself alive with Ramades, even in death loving a man condemned for treason. Intricate gilt bas-relief surrounds the rows of balconies, but I only see faces pushing out from the walls, screaming, trying to escape. I feel the oppressive heat, the pleats in an orange skirt, the sweat dripping from my face. I told them what they wanted to hear, provided names and a place. I think now about America, changing my name, marriages and divorces. Whether I was an alien of low moral character was no matter. Whether businesswoman or whore, above all, I was American. I did what I was asked. I remember one summer day in Chicago. Walking toward the lake shore, I decided instead to continue to the conservatory. Inside, I brushed past giant ferns and orchids and sago palms, when suddenly a sparrow flew inside and rose to the glass ceiling, in no hurry to find its way out. Outside on the promenade, I reached over the railing toward water lilies and thought the whole world was there for my taking. At the end of the opera, there will be applause, likely a standing ovation. The heroine will be dead. I shall be buried here, too, in no country of my choosing. A woman forced to choose between herself and her country is a tragedy. Going along with the outer space theme, for Pulsar, Ian Curtis had begun to experience seizures, wrote, "She's lost control" about a woman he knew who disappeared. He later discovered she had died. So it's a wonder that the cover of Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures displays not an encephalogram of a grand mal seizure, but rather radio waves from the first discovered pulsar flaring 1,000 light years away in the constellation Vulpecula, the Little Fox. The star's core, long ago collapsed, compressed, then exploded, now oscillates its radiation into the universe. Finally, each indecipherable signal reaches us, is plotted and ordered, the records of a life and its failures, a collapsed marriage, terminated biographies, a body in anguish. And yet, like an electrical storm firing across the brain's hemispheres, the pulsar's beacon strobes in the void, says, "Here I am, find me, I am here." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chad. And I was excited as soon as we sat down and I saw Bob's poems. Yes, Chad is writing new poems. So I just wanted to open it up to questions, comments from the audience. If you have questions for us as poets, for me as an editor, anything at all. And I like that it's a mic. I could do like a Phil Donahue thing. I could walk into the audience. And I wanted to thank Nick for shooting all of this. Our director. When you're traveling, I always forget something, and this time I forgot a little stand. Normally, I like to videotape our events, and then we would just put a phone on a little tripod and just relax. And this way, I don't know, I'm so grateful. I was like, Nick, I know I forgot the tripod. Maybe just tape Chad's reading. He's been taping this whole thing. So a round of applause for Mark Foster's partner, Nicolas Garcia. So yeah, any questions? Yes.
Did anyone receive notes from editors that surprised them and that you were resistant to change?
Great question. I mean, we already learned that Chad didn't get any notes from us because he has gotten so many. But you know what? Like, do you remember anything from our workshops? Did I ever say something stupid and you were like, because we were, so some of these poems I remember, some of these poems I remember from workshops in like 2006. And so I sometimes flash back and I was like, I wonder if I said something dumb about this poem, but I guess not. Yeah, but maybe, so it could go all the way back from either editors that worked with you on these books, or I worked with Robin, and everything she said was brilliant, and mainly had to do with, honestly, rearranging the poems. I had you kind of have a big idea. These poems emerge over a long period of time, usually. And you have kind of a big idea of how they should be sequenced. But you need, I think, you need someone who is removed from your process to actually see the most interesting. It doesn't have to be a logical, sequence. It could be surprising in many ways, but the most compelling sequence, which should be the opening poem, which should be the last poem, how they should be sectioned off, or maybe they shouldn't be sectioned off. And so it revealed the book to me, getting Robin's feedback. And then the thing that was surprising, but I wasn't actually resistant to it. It was enlightening, was how sometimes I would have long lines because I'm typing on the computer, and the Word document is actually broader than the margins of a book, And so we had to, with Robin, I reworked, relineated, rebroke the lines of some poems, or turned them into prose poems. And that, again, revealed those poems as something new to me. So it was all exhilarating. There was a lot of editorial work involved for practical purposes and artistic purposes, and it was all great. I loved it all. But yeah, do you have any memories, either from workshops or editors?
Well, what I think, so I have a wonderful relationship with my editor, Courtney LeBlanc, who runs Riot New Throat Press. But one thing that I wasn't resistant to, but sometimes surprised me, was sometimes she would suggestions about like titles that were different from what I would expect. This book is in sections, and the sections have titles, but when I submitted the manuscript, they didn't. And we kind of went back and forth, and she pulled some things and said, what about this, and then I go, not that one, but this one, and it was very revealing in that way. But I think that sense of like getting zoomed out and seeing the book, I think publishers, editors see the book as a book first.
That's
where
right.
I think when you're writing it, like you see the poems as poems first, and so that's I think where those moments of like, oh, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that, or that didn't emerge for me as the theme of this moment, or the order that should go in. That is really exhilarating. I think that's a good word for it, to see your work through a different lens. So, yeah.
I don't remember receiving a lot of comments from editors on these. I think I might have gotten one actual piece of feedback in the process of sending some out. It was mostly just rejections. I think in one of the final stages that this took, I had sent it to a friend from the program, Garrett Brown, who had given me a lot of great feedback on here. And I think a lot of it I had kind of suspected. I just needed someone to tell me, with either poems that weren't working and needed to be removed, or just some encouragement with a few where I was like, I'm not sure if this one should go in, can you tell me? And he suggested a few others of re-breaking lines into couplets that I hadn't thought of, that I thought was was helpful. So I think very similarly, I had a kind of experience like that with getting some feedback that kind of put this into a final, better form.
Yeah, absolutely. It's teamwork after a while. Any book you've read ever, and not everyone is credited, but it's teamwork. Yeah. So Chad, you're working on a new manuscript now already, or?
It's 8 pages long. Yes.
Okay, that's all we need, like a little seed. Yeah, I get nervous if there's nothing, if there are no pages. I mean, they eventually emerge. How about you, Laura? Are you already at work?
Yes and no. It's not a manuscript yet.
Right, it's not a manuscript, but yeah, like new seeds are emerging, and hopefully something new will grow. I used to be nervous about like whether this would continue, because I enjoy the process of creating something out of nothing. But after a while, like, because you have dry periods, right? And now I know it's a part of the process, and I always wonder like how other poets feel about it. Do you get nervous during periods of I don't know, nothing new is happening, or do you now embrace it as part of the whole process and accept it?
So I used to get nervous, but now I feel like I know the rhythms for me. And one thing that I do that really helps me actually, this might sound crazy to some people, but some writers and some writing programs and stuff, they say like, you have to write every day, you're not a real writer, like you have to write every day. And I can't write every day. Like I can't. The only thing I do every day is drink coffee. Like every day. But I have periods as a high school teacher these days. I have swaths of time where I know, oh, I'm going to have a big winter break. I'm going to have a big summer break. Like I'm going to have these moments, and so I spend a huge chunk of my time that I'm not writing, just scribbling stuff in a notebook and keeping notes for those times when I know I'll let myself write, like schedule-wise, and that works for me. It wouldn't work for everybody, but I think knowing that it'll come back. But like Chad, my first book was, by the time it was published, some of the poems were, like, I've been learning them for a very long time, and so that's a weird feeling too, of seeing them from your current self after that time. So I'm kind of curious for Chad about like what that's like to see, like that I'm almost 30 kind of moment, as a piece of a larger work.
Yeah. Sorry. I think, very similarly to both of you. I think I embraced not being able to produce, and it almost just came to terms with it that I wasn't going to until this got published. So this, thankfully, was a really great moment for me, because I realized, these are worth putting out there, and I can still do this. I think this thing has been brewing for so long, and I've sent it out so many times with mixed results. It came in as a semifinalist a few times in the contest, and I get my hopes up, and then I send it out a bunch of places and make some revisions, and then it would just get wholesale rejected again. And I think, when you were publishing it, I had told you, I was ready to relegate this to the dustbin of history and maybe one day, write something new. And it's been really nice revisiting these poems. I do feel like they're from a point in my life. It's something I'm proud of. And I think I'm still writing in a sort of vein, but there are also things I noticed here where it's like, wow, there are a whole lot of sentence fragments here. And I think it worked in this, but it's something I'm trying to work away from now. But that is kind of exciting to have a new project, not only with
content, but also like I want to try to do something different with my writing. Let's see where I can go with it.
Does that feel meta at all with the title and like title poem of recordings of dead languages and birds flying away with the words? Like, is that?
I never thought of it that way. Now it is. Yes.
So we heard one myth about writing that we're taught. It turns out not to be good advice, but just myth, which is write every day. Can you think of anything else? One of them would be like, do not write fragments. No, sometimes you need fragments. You need to, as long as you have control over the sentence, right? You can do whatever you want, you know.
Don't write what you know.
Don't write what you know. Right?
I mean,
write to find out new things, yeah. To learn new things, yeah.
but
Absolutely.
writing through what you know can often get you to something more surprising and interesting too.
Any thoughts from the audience on that? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say one of the myths is you have to have an MFA.
From Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have degrees now, we don't, yeah, in fact, you don't have to publish.
Yeah.
You're a writer if you're writing. And if you're writing and rewriting and sharing it maybe with one person, you know, or even not sharing with one person. Like, if you're writing and rewriting and thinking about it, you're a writer. That's it, yeah. Definitely, don't worry about awards.
Yeah.
You're probably not writing for the kinds of people who sit on award committees. if you're not getting, you know.
Well, and this is like, I think about this since this is, you know, a small press focused event. I think about that a lot too. I think of, because this is not a myth, this is a fact. Poetry does not make you any money. So you're not writing for money. You're writing. Right. So a lot of times people chase prestige, right? But where does prestige come from in the poetry world? Well, it's those awards, or it's feeling like, oh, this press that publishes this person I like. I want to be with that, but I'm going to be at that press. But that's all illusory, right?
Totally.
Like, the question is like, do you have work that you're proud of, and is anybody getting to read it? And I've had an amazing time working with a small press and developing a relationship with that press and with my pressmates as well as my editor, and feeling like I'm part of, you know, like a collective effort of putting art into the world. And when I think about my favorite poets, like, many of them published with small presses or founded small presses or things like that. So that's something, if you're an aspiring writer out there and thinking about how do I get my work out there, like, don't, like, prestige is meaningless. Like, it is just such a leftover from that, like, Iowa MFA, 20th century landscape.
Exactly, 20th century landscape, when the State Department was funding these things to build soft power, and that's not even going on anymore. So don't worry about it, right? Right, just for the sake. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like literary journals, writing programs. They were trying to build soft power, and and I don't know. Actually, it wasn't successful at all. Like, for that purpose, you know, it did not achieve that purpose, but they kept doing it, you know. It's like we were talking about conspiracies and conspiracy theories, and how wild people are coming up with these wild conspiracy theories about all these, like, amazing things that somehow governments are doing and bamboozling us about. Meanwhile, they had been doing different, you know, they had been involved in conspiracies, but they're always kind of dumb, like funding a literary journal or following John Lennon. Not amazing, like faking a moon landing or convincing us that the Earth is round when it's flat.
Yeah, speaking of publishing too, I think one of the best pieces of advice when I was in my MFA program, I asked one of my teachers about, like, should I care about publishing, and if so, what do I need to do? And she was like, put your poems in envelopes and wait. And granted, this was like in the early 2000s, so like envelopes were a thing. Yeah. But I mean, I think the idea still applies, is just, you sit down, you essentially wait for a rejection. Like, one day, like, you'll get some good news.
But that's all there is to it, and it's not as important as actually working on and crafting poems and caring about them. And I mean, eventually, someone will recognize that it's worth it. But I think so many people, especially young students, get caught up in I must have something published. And I think there's a pressure to do that. And it really isn't all that meaningful. Because also, if you go and read a lot of literary journals, there's a lot of crap in there too.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes we don't even like poetry, don't even like I kind of alongside that, like the importance of publishing, this is a piece of advice that has obviously been proven true. I'll tell you what it is. And most recently I heard Stuart Dybek say that at a reading. But I've heard like a version of this from many famous authors, and not so famous, which is when you're with a group of peers, in a writing group, in a writing class, some kind of a occasion, right? And that probably goes for any kind of creative work, whether it's music or art or whatever. Look around who you're hanging out with. Those are the people who, down the line, some of them will be publishing you, will be promoting your work. It's not, don't worry about like what some currently prestigious magazine or gallery wants and thinks about you. This is your group now, this is your crew, and there will be some of them years from now. And that's absolutely true, when we were in those workshops together in 2006, 2007, I didn't, first of all, like print on demand then was pretty janky. And so the idea that I would start a press was the farthest thing from my mind in many ways. But almost 20 years later, here we are, and so that's like a great piece of advice. Whatever you're doing, whatever you care about, your peers, those are the ones that will determine what happens in years to come. And you will be helping one another. And again, my favorite poets in the past, if I look into their careers, that's what had happened to them. And that's a wonderful thing. That makes me hopeful about the future, even. Like me, hopeful about the future.
That's from the answer.
Yes.
I have sort of like two thoughts, and I'm like a science background. This is very different for me, just a heads up, so feel free to go whichever way is best. It's interesting talking about like the experience of publishing poetry, because I've been in the realm of like publishing for science. We see so many similarities here, which is, I think, just sad that we're in a world where there's so much sort of like egoism and sort of like elitism that goes into publications and what actually gets out there. There's a lot of really bad science that gets published. So I guess it's just like really insightful being here and hearing about how like poetry faces a similar thing that science faces right now. And if anyone has any thoughts on that, that'd be pretty cool to hear. The other thing I'd be curious about is you all talked about like your different processes for how you bring a poem to life, whether it's 20 years or you're making notes down. Can you just talk a little bit about how you go from like an idea to an actual published poem, and like how you know that a poem is complete?
Another cliche, a poem is never completed or finished, it's abandoned or a work of art. This is what people say, I don't know.
I don't know if that's true.
I don't know if that's true.
Maybe it depends on what you mean by like complete, I guess. Like,
Yeah, you're not looking for perfection, but there is like a moment where like.
Yeah. I'll give you an example from my first book, actually. There was a poem in it that was about my mom's illness and death, and I worked on that poem, I think, for 10 years, on and off, and I knew that it was good, but I knew it wasn't done. Like, I could just tell that it wasn't done. And then I had the thing that then made it, I went, oh my God, it is done. I did two things. One was I reversed put the end at the beginning and the beginning at the end. Like, I reversed the order that I had started with, and that just really opened up something. And then that allowed me to find a new last line. And when I found the new last line, after I switched the order and then new last line happened, I felt like I instantly knew, like, it was done, and it wasn't an abandonment. I'm like, oh, it felt like solving a puzzle or something.
That's
like
it,
that.
that's it. That's how it feels for me.
Yeah,
I
and
feel
it
like
was
I'm
just like,
problem solving. Yeah.
totally, and that doesn't happen with every poem, but that was one that I worked on for, like, I don't know why I knew it wasn't done, but I knew it wasn't done until that moment, and I couldn't really articulate what the difference was, but I felt it, like, internally very strongly. So most poems don't take, I don't know, maybe most do. Most of my poems don't take 10 years to finish, but a couple, but every now and then they do. But that process, I think some poems, by contrast, in this book, like that poem in which I failed to teach Homer, that almost came out fully done, which was a crazy experience. But I also had been trying to write about that Sally Ride tampon thing for so long. Like, I did so many failed poems about that like when
Your brain was
it was working in the background, and so when that one happened, that poem was easy to write, but also was a product of like 20 different failed poems before it. So that happens to me sometimes.
I think for me, something that I realized during this process is that I could probably tinker with these poems endlessly, but at some point you just have to let go. But even until like the final publication, like I was sending Robin like a note. There's a short sequence in here that all of the poems have something to do with glass, and like it's sort of based on the idea that like some people say it's a solid, some people say it's a liquid, but ultimately like the poems are about like, here is what we don't know, and you can never know some things, and hey, how about that? But there are a couple of them that are talking about collectible glass that goes up for auction, and I'm also exploring the idea of value, like how do we determine that? It doesn't really make sense if you watch Antiques Roadshow and try and figure out why something is what it's worth. Who knows? And there was a line that I had about an authentic stack of plates looks like a V, and I was trying to get across the idea that you should see that. But then I just kept reading, and I was like, plates don't look like V's. That's not right. And so I was still sending in a revision of that right up to the end. And I've read of authors like Raymond Carver who, even during readings, would continue to revise his work. And
there's like oddly, if you like changed, he had some poems that he wrote at the outbreak of World War II, and then after World War II, he changed because he felt they were too optimistic, and so he would change lines.
Yeah, and I think you can do that, but I think for me, it's like, in order to get to something new, you have to leave something behind, and so like, if I were Auden, I think I would just say, oh, I was much more optimistic then, let me be a pessimist now.
Yeah. Great, I think that's always interesting to me, is that when you take something that you don't feel like the same person anymore, who wrote that. And I imagine this happens in scientific research too, if you started something a long time ago, and you're like, the process or the question I have has evolved over time, and yet the thing I did is still the thing I did. It needs to be represented in a certain way. Like there's always like past versions of yourself in your own work.
I think there's also a myth that writing poetry is all about my emotions, my feelings, and that science is only about the rational and no feelings whatsoever. And I think in reality, both are both, and some poems are more, cerebral, some are maybe more linked to the overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility, to go back to Wordsworth. So I think that would be, I've never done, this is like something I've always envied when it came to like scientists and scientific work, if you're doing scientific work, you could write poetry on the side. Unfortunately, as fascinated as I am with science, I cannot do science on the side. But, you know, as human beings, it's just a matter of, do you want to actually work that muscle?
It's interesting hearing you say that because, like, in my mind, I'm so far away from like what you all create is so impressive and was so immersive. As you were saying, it's like we were on the spaceship and then we were with Odyssey and then we were with the whales on the beach. Like we were transported all these places, and I don't have the confidence in my writing to be like that. But I guess, you know, maybe in the same way, I'm like, well, you could be a scientist, you could write science. It's just whatever we do, we're like, hopefully everyone could do, right?
I could be a citizen scientist. I will be a citizen scientist.
We need citizen scientists pretty soon,
Yeah.
so. I think that when I think of, sorry, we destroyed it. No, but I think sometimes when I teach poetry to my high school students, like one of the definitions that I go back to is that the word poetry comes from ancient Greek from poiesis, which is just making. And so I think about like poetry is something made of words. And so anybody can make something out of words, and people do all the time. But
And children do all the time.
All children are poets. In the same way, all children are artists, and then we start judging ourselves. So.
And I think for me, just so many of my poems involve science in some way. And I think when I first started discovering my voice, my poems were highly confessional. And I don't think I'm a highly confessional person. That was a kind of something I had to go through in order to learn how to write. But it's also not how I operate and think on a regular basis. And so there's something I enjoy about the kind of move about writing about facts in the world and then finding some sort of emotional or intellectual root in it somewhere where you can make it universal. And it is. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.